Welcome aboard the Athletics Can't Wait Jets podcast, your nonstop shop for all things Jets with Tim McMaster, Zach Rosenblatt, and Marissa Dunn.
Can't wait!
Yesterday was the shortest day of the year, and maybe there's some symmetry that the Jets have bottomed out, and as the days get longer, this franchise will head back in the right direction. That's what we're hoping for. It took me a while to come up with that intro. I'm struggling these days, Zach, to come up with something off the top. But we are continuing our holiday push for 5-star reviews here on the Can't Wait podcast. Thank you for joining us. Give us a review. Say something nice. Say something mean. As long as there's 5 stars, we don't care on Apple. We appreciate that. We are kind of getting you ready for the Commanders game, although we're not going to try to dig too deep into a game between a team with 4 wins and a team with 5 wins. We're going to go bigger picture. Andy Vasquez is going to join us from the Jets beat, so he will team up with Zach here on that. We'll do some trivia for Andy because he's been covering this team longer than Zach or I have been doing this podcast. So a lot to get to. The news, though, Zach, the newest news of the day, and we'll talk about Aaron Rodgers as well, but the newest news is that Zach Wilson will not be ready to go from concussion protocols. So Trevor Siemian is going to start for the New York Jets. 4th starting quarterback of the year for the Jets. The first 3 haven't gone well. No reason to think Siemian will either, although last time he started a game, it went well for the Jets.
Not well for him. I think he got hurt in that game in 21 or 2019. Yeah, that was the year they played Luke Falk. Like that was one of the worst. So Rich Cimini, I'll credit him with this. This is the first time they'll have started 4 different QBs in the same year since 1989, which is a year before I was even born. And that was Ken O'Brien, Pat Ryan, Kyle Mackey, and Tony Eason. I've heard of Ken O'Brien and Pat Ryan, not the other 2. I'm not as attuned to Jets QB misery as Rich Cimini, of course. But yeah, you know, it did kind of always feel inevitable when they signed Trevor Siemian to the practice squad. It's like he's going to start at some point this year. Like you kind of knew it. And I kind of felt the same way when Brett Ripien was signed, and I still kind of feel that way. So it would not surprise me if we end the season and there's a 5th starting quarterback for the Jets. And it's not exactly a recipe for winning. The musical chairs we saw last year, the difference was the quarterbacks at least were decent. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is good, obviously, but we didn't really see him play. He technically counts as a starter this year. But yeah, you know, last year they had Mike White and Joe Flacco, who at least were capable of having good games. And I don't know that Trevor Siemian, I was looking at this stat on True Media. He has the highest off-target percentage of any quarterback in the league this year with at least 35 pass attempts. So he throws the most balls that are off the mark. I think it's like 25%, which is like very high compared to the rest of the league. Like even the worst ones are in the low teens or like the 10s. And Trevor Siemian is like 24% off target percentage. So
yes, we talk about Zach's inability to make the easy throw, but then this is off the chart.
He's I haven't seen officially because frankly I've been following the Washington news. I imagine it'll be Sam Howell. Can't imagine there's many worse quarterback matchups in the league. There has been some weird ones because there's a lot of
Trubisky versus Zappi was a real winner. Bad. Although I would say that
one might be worse. You're probably right. Yeah, it's a bit. Howell and Siemian is pretty rough. It's going to be an ugly game on Christmas. I imagine tickets are going to be pretty cheap. I kind of want to look up how much they are because it's always fun to look at. Not fun, but it says tickets as low as $8 on Sunday. So if you have a kid who has never been to a Jets game and you haven't want to spend a lot of money to watch the Jets, this might be an
on Christmas Eve. It's beautiful.
Bring your kid at the last minute surprise gift to watch Trevor Siemian take on the Washington Commanders. You know what your kid has probably dreamed of since he was a child, seeing those 2 things. But yeah, you know, I mean, there's stuff like I'll be keeping my eye on over these last 3 games, but the results only matter insofar as if it's a disaster. I don't think it's good for Robert Saleh. Washington, I don't even know if they care about these games anymore. Their coach is as lame duck as it gets. He's only there because they respect him and he's going to get fired. He's been known to get fired for a while. Kind of calls into question why Eric Bieniemy wanted to take that job. You hope you see some flashes from these young guys that they might need to play roles next year. And you hope that everybody stays together and that the locker room doesn't tear apart. And that's Robert Saleh's goal for these next 3 weeks is don't let it become a disaster. And if they end the season with 5 wins after losing all 3 of these, that's pretty hard to come back from, I would say.
Yeah, and we said it. The embarrassing games are what get coaches fired. We saw it with Brandon Staley and the Chargers, and the Jets had one of those last week, but it was against an elite team.
Yeah.
If they have one of those against a bottom dwelling team and the Washington Commanders, then I don't think that's really possible, because I think this defense does have enough pride that the Commanders put up 30 points on them. Like, an embarrassing loss to the Commanders is probably like 10-6, right?
Or the defense doesn't show up, I guess, would be the worst possible thing to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that's gonna happen. I'm just like, if you want to like play out the worst case scenario, like I would say that is the defense doesn't show up or somebody gets hurt, and then the wheels fall off and Washington gets a 99-yard touchdown to Terry McLaurin or something. That's you can't rule anything out. Like I've said, there's always some weird shit that goes on with this team. So.
All right. And with that, let's bring in Andy Vasquez. Andy, thanks for coming on, reporting from. Nice to see that you're actually at work today, unlike that.
What can I say? I got to be honest. I just got here, but yes, I made it today, Zach. Nice to see you virtually and not in person for once. I see you every day.
We see each other too much. Yeah.
Can't wait for it to stop.
Andy's joining.
No offense. You're a great guy. Great guy.
If you're not watching the stream, Andy's joining us from the Jets facility to talk about this team. And I give you credit, Andy, for agreeing to come on, because these are not the times when you really want to dive in and continue to talk about this team. But we have some fun stuff.
Wait, I was told we were just going to talk about Connor. And I was going to make fun of him. So that's the only reason I agreed.
We could set aside some time for that for sure.
There's always room for that.
We
are going to play trivia with you, though, so that we're looking forward to. But what I was going to lead the show with, and we waited because we knew you were there as well, is today is a special anniversary in New York Jets history. Exactly 1 year ago, Chris Streveler had one of the most dynamic performances
we've ever seen
year for the New York Jets. The Thursday night game, obviously. It was a disastrous game, but Streveler came on. The crowd was fired up. For a few moments, he really sparked this team. He famously, at this point, missed what should have been a wide open touchdown, but was a 20-plus yard gain that brought the house down. Do you have any special memories from the brief Chris Streveler era in that game a year ago?
Yeah, I thought my favorite memory was when they ran Zach Wilson out onto the field. I think must have been at the start of the fourth quarter, and he just got absolutely hammered with boos. And then they ran Strevel out. So they could have just had him come out to start the drive, but no, they had Zach run out there and he got booed like crazy. And then Streveler came out and got cheered, which somehow made that moment even, worse for Zach, if that's possible. But yeah, to me, that was just kind of sums up his tenure here. Zach's tenure, man, this kid has had it rough, and it's almost like he probably shouldn't have been the only option after Aaron Rodgers this year. And I know people say that's hindsight or whatever, but how do you come back from that? I was saying it after the year. I never thought they would seriously bring him back as an option after that. And here we were again. And I think it being such a loaded situation has to factor into why it went so poorly for him again.
Yeah. I'll say that just to go back to the Streveler game for a second. That is one of the weirder. You've covered the Jets longer than me, so you've seen some weird games. But that was one of the weirder secret, especially because it wasn't like there was any hint that it was going to happen leading up to that game, and then all of a sudden he's out there, and then they're not taking him out, and he's leading the offense down the field at the very least. He's not really completing. The balls aren't going very far down the field, I would say. But it said a lot that the offense was moving with him that in a way it wasn't with Zach, and they haven't really found that spark this year. They tend to do the last couple of years, where a Mike White or a Joe Flacco comes in, and they have not had that spark this year. And it's very disappointing, because you just look at this roster, and we've obviously talked about it all year. This roster is a good roster. No matter what excuses they want to make, this is a roster that should not be a 5-win team. And they just bungled the whole quarterback thing so epically. And so we're sitting here now reflecting on a time when their offense last actually moved well. So
it is crazy to think he drove the field. He actually did that, and we haven't seen that this year.
Which is crazy. We should talk about Aaron Rodgers as well, because obviously since we last did the show, Zach, he is officially not playing football this season. Went on Pat McAfee on Tuesday, as he always does, and said some interesting things. I mean, he said, I'm not 100%, which we all knew. And obviously it's just crazy to, for him to go out there and try to play not 100% for a team that's going nowhere. But he also did something that kind of anticipated, although I was curious. He gave his public support for Robert Saleh, Joe Douglas, and Nathaniel Hackett as well. Andy, at this point, how much power does that have on Woody Johnson in this organization when Rodgers, I don't want to say goes out of his way, but makes the point to once again say, these are my guys, even though the season is off the rails, obviously?
Yeah, I think it confirms, I guess, the influence that Rodgers already has, because I don't think he'd be saying that publicly if he thought there was a chance they'd get fired, and then he would look like it would not look well to his influence over the team. So I think that's, first of all, what it says. And I think the entire time Woody has been here, he's been craving this relevancy that Rodgers, even though he hasn't been on the field, it makes the Jets relevant in a way they haven't been really almost the entire time he's been here. He validates that they're doing something right if he came here. So that I think that's why, even more than him being a really good quarterback, who he is and his standing in the game, and that he chose the Jets, is the biggest reason why it's so powerful. And to me, for him to do that also, you can't really sit here and blame the coach and the GM after this. You can, there will be things to blame him for, don't get me wrong. But it's on Rodgers now to deliver. He is saying everything is going to be different with me next year. Basically verbatim, he's saying that. So do it. You have to do it, because if you don't, it will, his legacy is secure as one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. But there is another legacy as to how he's going to leave this situation, because it's been too much of a high profile thing to just disappear. So is he either going to be the guy who somehow made the Jets worse, or is he going to be the guy who made this situation, at least better, and it can end up being a good thing that he was here? Because I don't think there's really going to be an in between. Even if they can't win a Super Bowl with him, I think if it's not a disaster and he paves the road for these young guys, it can be a good thing. But if it's bad, it's going to be holy crap, this guy somehow went to the situation and made it worse. And I do think that that's a real thing that is at stake here.
Yeah, the biggest issue the Jets ran into this year is that, you can't blame him for being hurt, but you lose him, and then you see all the bad parts of having Rodgers in your building, what that looks like. Because I do think, he goes on Pat McAfee every week for a paid appearance, and on some Tuesdays he was criticizing the team. There's the week where they were pointing fingers at each other. He said everybody has to grow up, and he's going out there and he's saying all this stuff, and he's doing that while not being in the building, or he's only in the building for a couple of days. And so I don't know how much everybody loved all of that necessarily, but that wouldn't even be an issue if he was just those appearances wouldn't have been as big of a deal if he was playing for them, because everybody loved everybody in training camp, as they often do. But this team really, really did believe in itself. That was a real thing. They thought they were going to win a Super Bowl, or at least compete for one. And then he goes down, and then they're left with themselves and the Jets not going and getting a quarterback, and kind of just being okay with the status quo, the defense doing their job, the offense not, the offensive coordinator who does not seem capable of adjusting to the teams he's playing against. And so you had this repeated week after week. It was they just resigned themselves to the season long before they were eliminated. And I think that is not something that's going to resonate very well in the locker room. And it really does just trace back to him getting hurt, because I do think his presence did mean something in training camp. He was really working hard to get everybody flowing in the same direction and all that stuff, even more than the coaching staff is even capable of, because he, carries some more weight when he talks. But now they were left with this coaching staff. They were left with an offensive coordinator, again, who just week after week just does not change what he's doing, even when it's not working. And I don't know how everybody in that building feels about the fact that Hackett is just locked into a job. To have a historically bad offense, I can't imagine there's been many instances in history, or at least modern NFL history, where a guy is not even considered that they'd be getting rid of him. And that part is like where Rodgers is like, it's a quarterback friendly offense. And that's true in the sense that it's only friendly to one quarterback. It's not a quarterback's friendly offense. It's only friendly to Aaron Rodgers because he runs the offense when he's out there. So it's a mess here. It's kind of like the bed the Jets made. Like they knew all the risks involved when you get a guy like Aaron Rodgers. They were willing to do it. And I don't even blame them for that. Going all in on Aaron Rodgers for a team that has not had a good quarterback in so long, like absolutely makes sense. And especially you look at Derek Carr in New Orleans, he was the fallback plan, and he's been a disaster there. His teammates don't seem to like him. The fans hate him. And I don't think we've reached that with Aaron Rodgers yet, or if we will. And, whatever the other options were, whether it's Tannehill or Jimmy Garoppolo, like these are all guys that aren't even playing right now because they're not good. So they've got the best possible option. It just went terribly because they're the Jets. And now you're going to be going in the next year. There already were questions about if Aaron was on the decline, and now he's coming off an Achilles. He's 40. They're going to have to revamp the entire offensive line. They have a second receiver they need. A lot of stuff they got to do this offseason. But, yeah, I don't know. I'm curious to see what the level of optimism is going to be with the fan base this offseason, because it obviously was very high this last offseason. Like, is it going to be measured? Probably not if they go and get Devontae Adams or something like that. But, I feel like I wonder if there's going to be a little more skepticism about the Super Bowl stuff, and maybe stop talking about the Super Bowl. It would be my advice to some people in that building, because you need to get to the playoff before you can say that anybody should believe you can win the Super Bowl. Frankly,
yeah, a lot of what Sean Payton said, unfortunately, is kind of like played out here about the off season and being everything the Jets were in that offseason, and they end up beating Sean Payton. But then from that point, now the Broncos find themselves
the Broncos have been great,
in playoff contention. I don't know if they'll get there, probably not, but they're right there with 3 weeks to go, which is the Jets would kill to do at this point. All right. Do we want to play some trivia with Andy, Zach?
Yeah. So right. We traced it back to Andy's first year on the beat in 2016. Before we do it, like, how would you describe like your journey covering the Jets? Like, what do you remember about like that first year when you covered them? I'm curious. In 2016.
Yeah, the first game they lost on a missed extra point, ended up being the difference from Nick Folk, and then everybody thought his career was over. He's still kicking. They lost to the Bengals by 1, and the missed extra point was the next week. Ryan Fitzpatrick won AFC Offensive Player of the week, but with a great performance in Buffalo. But then you saw like first signs like something might be really wrong. Like Revis got roasted. I can't remember the guy who roasted him. And then week 3, Fitzpatrick bounces back or comes back from the AFC Offensive Player of the Year with 6 interceptions.
That's right.
And the final 6 possessions of the game. And I was like,
oh my God, that's amazing.
And then it just kind of went from there. And that year was a disaster. I was just talking about it with a coworker I just saw at lunch. A few weeks later, it was like Geno Smith was antsy on a Monday Night Football game to play, and the Jets got crushed in Arizona. We were leaving the stadium to go down to the locker room. We saw Larry David, and one of the beat writers asked, like, "Did you enjoy the game, Larry?" He's like, "Oh yeah, it was tremendous." They lost by like 40. It was like, "It was tremendous. I really enjoyed it," like sarcastically. And it's just kind of been like that the whole time. I mean, the team had not been above 500 in my time covering them past like October 15th until last year.
Yeah.
And then they played all of their way more games over 500 last year than I'd ever seen. And then they collapsed. It's just been kind of the same story. And to me, the remarkable thing is like I didn't think I would see an offense worse than what I saw in like 2019 when you're running like David Fales and Luke Falk out there, and Fales they wouldn't even let Fales throw. And then I've seen like several games worse than that this year. Against the Eagles was that game. They got sacked 10 times. And I've seen a lot worse. So this year. So yeah, it's been a challenge to kind of, it feels like kind of the same thing every year. So this year's been different because of the start, and then last year was a little different. But yeah, it's a challenge to find a way to tell the story and not just be like, oh, look at this team. This is what they do, because it's not always going to be like this. Like they have taken steps in the right direction in some ways. And it's the weirdest part is like the best thing for them to do. This like perfectly sums up the Jets. Like the best thing for them to do is what they're doing next year, which is to hand the keys to Rodgers. And it's still like crazy. It's like a crazy situation in a weird situation. And it's probably like not going to work out. I mean, it could work out, but like you could see how it doesn't. So that's, I guess, how to sum it up best. Like the first few weeks, and then to now, like even when you think they're doing the right thing, it's hard to feel like it's going to work out.
Yeah, my whole thing with stuff like that is like until something happens, I can't believe that it's gonna like the Jets beating the Patriots. Like they absolutely should beat the Patriots in this last game, but like we have not seen them do it. Every time they play them, they look like the worst team. So like until I see it, like why would I predict that it's gonna happen, kind of thing. And that's kind of like probably where I know sometimes like I think because of like how bad it's been for you, everyone that's been on the beat longer than me, like there's times where weirdly like everybody gets like, okay, maybe they actually might be pretty good this week or this year, or maybe they can upset this team, and then the reality of the Jets happens. You're like, why do I do this to myself?
I'm a naturally optimistic person, which is a problem on this beat. Like I just like learn like, no, stop that. Don't think that. You can't, because they make me look stupid constantly. So
yeah.
All right, let's get into the trivia. Zach, we'll go back and forth. I'll kick things off here.
All right.
These are basically all based on the fact that you've been covering this team for a while now, Andy. So question number 1, how many wins do the Jets have total since 2016 when you joined the beat?
Oh man, I could do it if I had probably around 48.
There's your optimism.
Yeah, okay. I was trying to do the math in my head. I could have done it. I was trying to remember. It was like how many games now? It's probably like 38.
That was closer. It was 39. Yeah.
Okay.
As a comparison, the Chiefs have won 35 games in the last 3 years.
And I think that even includes their win total this year.
About right.
Actually, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. And this one's going to take a little more thinking. So don't fault you if you don't get it. Yeah. Which 15 quarterbacks have had at least one drop back since 2016?
Okay. Fitzpatrick, Bryce Petty, at least one drawback. So not Hackenberg. 15. Wow. Okay. So 20. Josh McCown.
It's 3.
David Fales would be on the list.
Yep. 4. He only had a drop back. No attempt, but yeah, he had a drop back.
Luke Falk is 5. Geno Smith is 6. Sam Darnold is 7. Okay. Sorry. Petty. Okay. Well, I'm just gonna go Aaron Rodgers. Zach Wilson.
You're up to 9.
Tim Boyle.
Yeah. Tim Boyle.
Yeah, I'm going on my hands on the tape, so that's 10.
Okay.
Tim Boyle. Okay, so now we're working back from this year. Mike White.
11.
Trevor Siemian on 2 different occasions.
12.
That's 12?
Yep.
Okay, so now working back into 2020. That's going to be the year that gets me. Yeah, I'll come in later. Thanks. 20. Okay, that's going to be the year that gets me. 20.
So I'll tell you, it's the 3 you're missing are from 22 and 21.
Connor just interrupting me, distracted me.
Oh, I didn't see.
Okay, wait. 2020 and 21. He was
2022 and 2021. Yeah.
Okay, 2022. That was just last year, so I should be able to pick that. I'm okay. Thanks. Yeah, thank you. I knew that was going to happen.
Sounds like you're a drive-through for people who aren't there.
Well, the funny part is like so many times I'll sit here and nobody will tell me, and then the one time I don't want them to, it's like 4 people are going to tell me we're going down. Okay, so 2022 last year. I'm not going. My brain is shot now, so you're going to have to tell me the last 3. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the last 3 are Joe Flacco, Chris Streveler, and Josh Johnson.
Oh, God damn it! I'm so mad.
The only one I'll be critical of you missing is Streveler, but.
Yeah, I mean, that should have been the first on my list, so I'm very sorry. I mean, I feel like I just insulted this podcast.
We forgive you.
All right, up next. Name all the offensive coordinators since you started covering the team.
Okay, man.
There are 6.
Chan Gailey, which is hard to believe that actually happened, but I was there for a year of him. Johnny Morton. Jeremy Bates.
You should be able to get the next 3.
Yeah, I'm just trying to. Obviously, Mike LaFleur, Hackett, and I don't know why I'm blanking on the one.
Gase.
Oh, Dowell Loggins, of course.
Yeah, there you go.
That's not really fair because Dowell Loggins was like an offensive coordinator. Okay, but
you got it.
Yeah, he did technically have the role. Yes.
Yeah. All right, next one. We'll get a few more, then we'll let you get to the locker room.
All good.
Who are the 3 leading rushers since 2016?
The 3 leading rushers since 2016.
Doesn't matter if you go in
I
order or
hate
not.
is Bilal Powell on that list?
He's number 1. Yeah.
That is that does sum it up. Brees Hall probably is there too.
Yep, he's third.
Which is also crazy because he's played
Yeah,
15
he played
games?
like 6 games last year. So yeah.
Yeah. So he's played and hasn't rushed for a ton of yards this year. And then it's not Matt Forte. It's certainly not Le'Veon Bell. Yeah, that's a great question. I would go with, yeah, man, I can't even think of one, which makes it really tough. They haven't had a running back so it's probably an obscure name, or I'm going to feel dumb. But yeah, it could be Zach Wilson. I mean,
I didn't factor in quarterbacks actually, so that I could be wrong, but it was Forte was number 2 actually.
Oh god damn, that is crazy. He was here for 2 years and it wasn't good. I was like,
they've ran through a lot of running backs. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and none of them have had good seasons.
No,
except for Brees, who's had close to flashes. But yeah.
All right, up next, we got some easy, not easy, but quick one answer ones. Who is the leading receiver in 2016 for the Jets?
Brandon Marshall. So Robbie Anderson.
Nope. Quincy Enunwa.
Wow. Okay, fair.
And then who is the leader in sacks in 2016?
Eldon Richardson. I can get that. Okay, I'll get that one. Man,
it's a guy who usually didn't get sacks and always got criticized for it.
Oh, Leonard Williams.
Yeah, he had 7 that year.
All right, let's do.
Yeah, let's do
go ahead,
yeah, I was gonna say we can skip the O-line one because that's a little.
Yeah,
a little
I was
I don't mind. I don't mind missing all these. They're throw it at me. I want to know now.
All right, we can do it. All right, it's name as many of the 5 offensive linemen who have started the most games since 2016 as you can. Like the five offensive linemen that have started the most games
since 20. Okay.
I'd say
Connor
one
McGovern.
of them is on. Yeah, I was gonna say one of them's on the roster right now. The rest are not on the roster right now.
Okay. Connor McGovern, Brandon Shell.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Okay. Brian Winters.
Yep.
This is already a win for you.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, I had to redeem myself after some of those. Not Becton, but he might be close. Lakin Thomas, you said not. So I already got
not
Winters,
current. No current. Yeah.
I think that's the best I'm going to do. But those were the ones.
That's good. The other 2 were Kelvin Beachum and James Carpenter.
Okay, I should have actually
do kickers and then
I'm not going to feel bad about
and then let them go, Zach.
Yeah, we'll do the kickers one and then let them go.
How many kickers can you name that made at least 1 field goal in your time
in the regular season? Because they had some preseason ones too. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so not that one guy who was here for one game. Nick Folk.
Mm-hmm.
This is bad because it just shows how shot my brain is. But I can't remember his name because he ended up signing with Seattle. He's been a pretty good kicker. I'm not gonna remember his name.
Jason Myers. Yeah.
Thank you. And I don't even feel bad. There's been so many kickers. Oh man, my brain is just at that point where I'm not remembering the names. But obviously, Greg Zuerlein, Matt Amendola.
Yep.
Was also turned out to be a hell of a punter, as we found out. Yeah, he punted. He ended up being the punter of the game where Braden Mann got hurt in the first game of 2021, and ended up being better than Mann was when he came back. I'm not doing well. They had a guy who was good for a little while there, and ended up going to the Rams. Or Sam Ficken, thank you. Sometimes I just talk through it.
That's good.
The guy who was the punter and kicker did not work out. Well, I don't even think he made one. First game of 2019. Okay.
There's one
Yeah,
that there's the one that Greg Zuerlein beat out last year. He's on the Panthers now.
Like Amendola is just like always going to be the answer that comes to my head when you say that, because I'm
Eddie
not going to.
Eddie Pinheiro.
Okay, Eddie Pinheiro, because they were both like kind of similar size. Yeah, I can't. I'm not going to do better
That's
than
okay.
this. My brain.
The other ones were
the kickers.
The other ones
going to scramble my brain. That's a great question, though.
Yeah, the other ones are Sergio Castillo, Chandler Catanzaro, and Austin Siebert this year made one. Yeah.
Okay.
You wouldn't have got that one. Yeah.
Wow. Wait, Austin Siebert made one this year?
Yeah, because there was the week where Zuerlein was like injured or whatever.
Oh, that's right. Oh my god.
Yeah, it feels like years
this has
ago.
been a crazy year. I feel bad about Catman. I don't feel bad about the other. I honestly could not even tell you when that happened, but yes, I do remember now.
All right. Well, Andy, thanks a lot for hopping on. We appreciate it. We appreciate you helping spice up the podcast for a day. Of course, you can check out all Andy's great stuff at nj.com, where he's been covering the Jets and knows this beat. And as you saw here, like, can pull some names for sure. Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, thanks, Andy.
Thanks for having me, guys. Take care.
All right, let's move things on. And the other main topic I wanted to get to, Zach, is based on a story that you have out in The Athletic. I think it dropped yesterday as we record this on Friday. You can join The Athletic. Go to theathletic.com/can't wait. Great deals going all the time, including the holidays. You can also gift The Athletic. If you haven't come up with something, Christmas 2 days away, time to panic mode and go and get the easy gift, a subscription to The Athletic. All right, so the article was position needs for 2024. So we've reached that point in the season where we're officially looking ahead to 2024. I don't know if we need to go through all of these. I have them all here. We'll see how far we get. Number one is the big mistake from 2023. I would hope that the Jets do not repeat history. Backup quarterback. And there's always players available. There were players available for this year. The Jets just chose not to go that direction. So it feels like there's no way they don't do this going into next year.
Yeah, I don't think it's actually their biggest need necessarily. I just think it's going to be a very important thing that I know internally they're going to understand they have to address it in a way that everybody's going to be happy with. Especially knowing that Zach Wilson is almost certainly on the way out. I don't think Woody Johnson wanted to pay 3 quarterbacks was one of the factors here. But Zach coming off the books, like a lot of the same guys that pretty much were available last year, plus some other ones. I wrote some down. I can run through them here. I think Ryan Tannehill is a fascinating one, unless he can get a starting job, because if they bring back Todd Downing, which I don't see why they wouldn't as of right now, but if they bring him back, he has a relationship with him. And he's a kind of veteran that can run an offense when the main quarterback goes down. He is 35 and he was benched this year after not playing that well. But I think he's interesting. We got, Jacoby Brissett, who's on Washington. He's been a solid veteran. I don't really get why Washington didn't trade him at the deadline, frankly, because they were going nowhere. But I think he's a solid player. Tyrod Taylor has the mobility that you maybe need behind this Jets offensive line. Jameis Winston hasn't really played much in the last few years, so maybe he's fresh. He's got a cannon, has led a team. Drew Lock just beat the Eagles. Not that as exciting. And there's guys like Gardner Minshew and Baker Mayfield who I think probably are going to get actual starting jobs, but just worth mentioning them if like they don't have a market or something. But yeah, I think everybody knows they cannot go into the season again next year without a quarterback plan. And I not only would sign a veteran, I would draft someone, whether it's early or later. Get somebody in the building you can develop as the third guy. And then if all hell breaks loose, as it often does with the Jets, you're a little more prepared because you have 2 guys you believe in.
Well, and you need to start developing the next guy too, right? Like
totally.
Get that guy in the building, because
or even if you're
Aaron
just
Rodgers
developing a backup. Yeah. Even if you're just doing what the Eagles do sometimes and they draft guys and they develop them and then they eventually trade them or something. Like, you just need better talent in that QB room to prepare for the worst case scenario, which always happens here.
I mean, best case scenario, Rodgers is there for 2 seasons, right?
Yeah.
But then what? And that now's a chance, if you have the opportunity, to do what the Packers have done so well, ironically, because of Rodgers, but like draft a quarterback that can actually sit and learn football for a couple of years, which means you don't take him probably in the first 2 rounds. But, there's always those guys, if you trust your scouting, that you can develop into a good quarterback. All right. Probably the biggest need, because you just mentioned that backup quarterback is not probably technically the biggest need. The biggest one, though, is all over the chat the moment we brought up the topic here. And that is not one offensive tackle, but 2 offensive tackles because Becton likely gone, Dwayne Brown likely retires, and this offensive line needs major renovation.
Yeah, I mean, offensive tackle, both sides. Like the fact that you might need a starter on both sides is not really ideal. But Joe Douglas, the one thing he promised, and I think I don't have this on me. People reference this a lot. I think he promised Sam Darnold's parents or something that he'd get him a good offensive line to protect him. Was like the whole story, and that just hasn't happened. And you could say it's injuries, and the excuse of the injuries to offensive line this season, like I 100% get it, and it's hard to win with an offensive line that's changing pieces so much, but that just ignores training camp when practice after practice we were reporting how bad the offensive line looked, and that's when everybody but Dwayne Brown was there. And even if Dwayne Brown was there, you're relying on a 39-year-old guy. But they were bad in practice. It was a whole segment on Hard Knocks where they showed Robert Saleh just chewing into those guys, and the Jets had the ability to pick what was shown on Hard Knocks, and they showed that. So, we can't pretend like this offensive line was good before everybody got hurt, because you remember week 1, Aaron Rodgers gets hurt. It was more because of the chip blocking than anything, but that happened. And then the week 2, Michael Parsons terrorizes them. There was maybe a moment in the Broncos game where the offensive line was at its best. You had Elijah Vera Tucker before he got hurt. Breece Hall ran wild that day. That was probably the high point of the O-line. They never needed to be a great O-line. They just needed to be good enough to protect the quarterback, and they really haven't been. But anyway, it's a long way of saying Joe Douglas hasn't really gotten the benefit doesn't deserve the benefit of the doubt at this point in terms of can he pick the right offensive lineman to build this group? And you look at even this last week, 3 of the 5 were guys that they invested heavily in. You had a first-round pick at left tackle who was awful. Laken Tomlinson at left guard, making a lot of money. He's not really living up to his contract. He's been the only one that's healthy every week. And his thing's going to be fascinating for next year. But center, you have Joe Tippmann, you drafted in the second round to play. So it's not like these are guys that you just found off the street. But yeah, so left tackle, right tackle, however you go about doing it, they don't grow on trees in free agency. That's why a lot of years you see these guys get overpaid and then they're not that good once they're signed. There's a reason why an offensive lineman makes it to free agency. It's not usually because of how good they are. I covered the Giants right after, the year after I think it was the year or 2 after was my first year. After they had signed Nate Solder to a huge deal because he was the best free agent offensive tackle that year. And he was an absolute disaster because he wasn't a good player. He was just the best of what was available. And I don't know who, I think I wrote down a few names in here. I think the big ones were Trent Brown, Tyron Smith, Jonah Williams, and Jermaine Eluemunor on the Raiders. Out of those, Trent Brown probably would be available. I imagine the Cowboys don't want Tyron Smith to leave. Jonah Williams is an intriguing one, but again, if these guys are available, I don't know that you want to pay them. And then, obviously they should draft someone early, but it's pretty rare that a rookie offensive tackle can come into the NFL and right away be good. It usually takes them an adjustment period. So you're having, number one, you're going to have an offensive line with as many as 3 or 4 new starters, probably 3, but maybe 4. And you maybe have a key rookie at least one of the spots. And it's going to be a rough training camp with that offensive line next year, I imagine. But and Elijah Vera Tucker, by the way, is coming off an injury for the second straight year. So, and Achilles is harder to come back from for an offensive line. So anyway, they need to completely revamp that group. I think you can count on AVT and Joe Tippmann at the very least. And then if you can get Laken Tomlinson to take a pay cut, maybe you bring him back. So there's a little bit of stability and veteran leadership in there, but his cap hit is $18 million and he's not worth that. So I'm very curious to see how they go with that. But yeah, Carter Warren hasn't shown enough yet to say you could start him. Max Mitchell is not a starter. Mekhi Becton is not coming back. Wes Schweitzer will be depth if he can stay healthy. But yeah, other than that, you need to completely redo this group. And I don't know if that also includes the O-line coach, but it's not like Keith Carter has dealt a great hand this year. But yeah, it's going to be another new group again. And this is going to be the group that's going to decide if this regime comes back, assuming they do, that's going to be what decides next season, the offensive line. So you better not screw it up.
All right, up next, number 2 receiver, which just seems crazy to me considering
every year,
how we thought of the receiver room kind of going into the year. Even you can go back further, the excitement around a guy like Elijah Moore when he was drafted. And then obviously all the money they spent on Allen Lazard. And hey, maybe with Aaron Rodgers back, Allen Lazard becomes Allen Lazard, but you can't count on that.
Yeah.
looking at what you looked at this year?
Yeah, I'd say ideally Lazard is your third or fourth receiver, which isn't ideal for a guy that's going to have like a $12 million cap hit and they're kind of stuck with him for one more year. Then he's gone. But yeah, I think they're going to invest in that number 2 receiver, maybe even more than they do in the offensive tackle, which I don't know if that's great, but they're going to go after a guy like Devontae Adams. Whatever of these top receivers hit free agency, and there's a few really talented ones, T. Higgins, Mike Evans, Michael Pittman. If any of them actually hit free agency, the Jets should absolutely be in on it. I don't even think you don't necessarily need like a superstar number 2. You just need a guy who's good enough to take some of the attention away from Garrett Wilson because he's kind of doing it all himself right now. So that's another position that, like, depending on where they end up in the draft, like, I mean, it'd be highly intriguing to put Marvin Harrison in this group with Garrett Wilson. And there's the receiver from LSU. What's his name? I'm blanking on his name. Malik Neighbors. These are like stud receivers. Ideally, you're not drafting receivers in the top 10 too many years in a row because that's just not like a value position in the draft. But a Marvin Harrison would be tough to pass up if they can get into like the top 3, top 4, and you pair him with Garrett. Use your other draft picks on linemen, and you sign some veterans. And again, like with to circle back the offensive line real quick, you can survive with like 3 or 4 good ones in like a spot, maybe a spot that like you're just like figuring it out. And the Jets need to feel good about 3 or 4 of their offensive linemen. And right now, I think you can feel good about 1.5, bit depending on what you get from AVT next year. So anyway,
of course, if you draft, Harrison in the first round, then you don't have a second rounder. And then when do you get the offensive lineman, right? It's a tricky spot. You're not going to get a plug and play offensive lineman in the third round. So
if you're drafting a guy in the third round, offensive line wise, there's probably a reason why he's in the third round. Like it's like the Carter Warren, Max Mitchell types.
All right, next, I don't know how many more of these you want to do, Zach, but let's do swing tackle. Well, I'll say this. When you look at your article, you go from offensive tackle to receiver to swing tackle to interior offensive line. I mean, so we could probably see that as a whole because we just discussed the offensive line. So another key position is going to be safety, and then we could probably move on.
Yeah, so since I've already hit the offensive line so much, I'll do this quick. So they picked Billy Turner as their swing tackle this year, and that was a very big mistake because he has a history of not being a very good offensive lineman. So you can say like they're playing Billy Turner, like what do you expect from them? Well, they picked him as their guy that was going to play if their tackles got hurt, so that's on them. So they need to get a better swing tackle. The depth on the interior, some of this depends on like, so what position is AVT playing? Are you starting him at left or right guard permanently, or are you going to put him at right tackle permanently? Because those are both on the table. And then that kind of depends. So like if he's playing right tackle, then all of a sudden interior offensive line becomes a bigger priority and all that. So something to keep in mind. But yeah, and then safety. And I'll throw in kicker and punter. I didn't include in the article because I imagine they'll resign Morstead and Zerline, but they are up for new contracts. But yeah, safety.
They are the best 2 players on the team. Sometimes
I mean,
it feels like.
I don't know the last time, and the Jets have had like such a good punter and kicker combo because those 2 are like very good. But I'd have to dig into that. But safety wise, so Jordan Whitehead hitting free agency, Ashton Davis hitting free agency. I think Tony Adams is pretty locked into a role. They really, really like him. They think he's had a really good year and he's getting better. That's a find as an undrafted free agent. Jordan Whitehead, I think the team likes a lot better than the fan base does because I think they feel like he does his job well. And there's certain things I saw ESPN had a thing where they went through like each trait from every position and they picked the best player at that trade. And Jordan Whitehead was listed for best top down defender because like his ability to come up to the line kind of thing. And I think he's solid. I don't think he's as bad as the fans think. I don't think maybe he's as good as the Jets think. But anyway, if he prices out of the range, you don't bring it back. I think Ashton Davis, weirdly, it's funny that we've gotten to this point because fans used to get mad when he would make the 53. But he's like shown some development and he has some intriguing athleticism. I think you bring him back for the right price. And if you're not starting him, you're at least like giving him a little bit bigger of a role. So they've shown in this defense that you don't need to invest a lot in the safety position. So I'd be fine with them running it back, though it wouldn't surprise me if they like drafted somebody and tried to develop him kind of thing.
All right, that's good for that. There's a few other positions in there too. Check out the full article for all the details from Zach in The Athletic. Let's wrap things up with picks for this week. And we start with the standings and still the 2 leaders there, although it got a little bit closer. There was more of a gap between the top 2 and third ESS, but we're a little tighter here. KMCASAZZ, I still don't know how to pronounce that, is leading the way, 113 total points. And then New Nijmegen Jets, 112, ESS at 110. And then you go down from there. So that's the leaderboard. And then let's get into the picks for this week. There are some really good games. Oh, and it did that to me again.
Everybody look at Tim's login info.
Yeah, luckily it doesn't actually show. And I'm 1 for 1, by the way, Zach. There
yeah, I got that one wrong. The Rams are good.
Night,
the Rams are good.
Yeah, they get to 7-7 now, tied with the Saints, 7-7 in a packed playoff race, obviously in the NFC. But there's some big games on this. Not quite the headliner, but 9-5 Browns at 8-6 Texans is a huge game. Obviously, we have personal, Michael Dunn.
We have Michael Dunn
for that game and wanting the Browns to get to the playoffs. They are favored on the road by 2 at Houston. That's a huge game as far as playoffs and who's going to get in.
I'm not sure if Stroud is going to play, which obviously is a big factor there too. So that's probably why the Browns are favored. But yeah, that's a good one. There's a few very intriguing games this week.
Yeah, and then really you can argue the top 4 teams in the NFL, considering the way the Eagles have played the last few weeks, are going head to head with Dallas at Miami, Dolphins -1.5, and then the Ravens at the Niners. Niners favored by 5.5. That one on Christmas night on Monday night. Those are 2 huge games. 4 teams that at this point in the season are legit Super Bowl contenders.
Yeah, those will be fun. The Dolphins are very banged up. I saw a tweet from earlier in the week where their entire offensive line was not spotted on the field, their entire starting offensive line. If you look at some of these games, Tampa Bay, Jacksonville is interesting because Jacksonville is going to be without Lawrence, and the Buccaneers have that NFC South division. It seems like every week one of the teams looks like maybe they're the best one, and then they switch off. But Baker Mayfield's having a really good year. We got the Washington Jets game. We probably should mention. I don't really want to even predict that game. Frankly, I said Washington +3.5. I don't say that with confidence because I think Washington's very bad, but we'll see what happens with that.
I said
Bills,
Jets
Bills should kill the Chargers,
although it feels like a 10-3 type win if they're going to win by 3.5.
Bengals Steelers could be interesting at the very least. The Steelers have quarterback issues and some attitude problems, but I forgot there were Saturday games this week actually. So Jake Browning, see if he still got something. But it should be an interesting week. A lot of games with because there's so many teams in the playoff race still. So a lot of these games kind of matter, which is kind of fun, except for the Jets Washington game, which has no relevance to anything other than maybe strength of schedule for somebody in a tiebreaker.
And this podcast. It's a wild week. You have the Thursday game, you have a couple of Saturday games, and then the 3 Monday games is fun because of the holiday and how it all plays out. So definitely enjoy plenty of football. You basically get to see half the league this week because of the way the games are staggered and all the national games. And of course the Jets on Sunday as well. So it should be a lot of fun. Next week, because it's kind of the holiday week, we will be doing a show, but we'll just do 1 episode. If there was playoffs on the line, I think we'd do 2. But at this point, we'll do kind of a recap, look ahead type episode coming up on Tuesday. We'll get the time to you before we get going. And then we're down to the last couple of weeks, Zach.
And then soon Marissa will be back, and she will not be getting the playoff run that we were hoping she would get when she came back. Unfortunately, the Jets couldn't do it for her. People talk about doing it for Rodgers. They didn't do it for Marissa Dunn, and that's disappointing.
We could become a Cleveland Browns playoff podcast.
Hey, there we go.
Couple weeks.
Joe Flacco, Michael Dunn. Elijah Moore.
Plenty.
A lot going on there.
A lot going on. Plenty to have fun with. So thanks to everybody for joining us here. We always appreciate you joining us on the stream, or if you were listening, join The Athletic or theathletic.com/can't wait. Also give us a 5-star review, and we'll do that next week too, Zach, as part of the in between.
Yeah. So definitely leave us some 5-star reviews. We need some more.
Yeah, we'll get them read and give props to everybody out there that listens to our podcast. We appreciate it. We'll talk to everybody again soon on the Can't Wait podcast.